I'm a 100% believer in God, 90% believer in religion. Why do I say 90%? Because the religion, the teachings that I get, I receive from priests who's been reading and interpreting what he's reading, and that what he's reading is what the disciples or the followers of the messengers and prophets understood from him, and what the prophets and messengers said is what they understood from what God said. So through that chain of this and that, this is the religion that we get, and that's why there's a difference between a believer in God and a follower to a certain religion or certain teachings of religion. I believe in science by 90%, but I believe in nature 100%. This is the same concept as I said about religion. Science is what the scientist, or the science that we read and learn, is the scientist's interpretation of how the nature works. Now, don't mind that relativity versus quantum mechanics. I'm still talking about science and religion. But this is just an example. It's a challenge between science and science, because relativity and quantum mechanics, they both seem to be two different things from two different worlds that don't make sense to us, unlike the Newtonian mechanics. So the relativity is right and quantum mechanics is right, and we don't have a unified theory because we don't understand them both correctly, or we don't understand what part of nature that we interpret as relativity and what we interpret as quantum mechanics. Relativity is that knowledge written by Einstein and other scientists to explain a certain aspect of our nature. So they're not gods, and they're not perfect. There could be some flaws or misunderstanding, and if there's no misunderstanding, relativity and quantum mechanics would have been in harmony since long. But that's not yet to happen. So back to my topic, science versus religion. Let's talk about science a little bit more. There's something called the pilot wave theory. The pilot wave theory is something that explains the double slit experiment, or the delayed choice. Not sure what its name, but it's discussing what is light. Is it particles or wave? Well, this says that light is particles carried or pushed by waves. That pilot wave theory was rejected, and I have doubts that it was mainly rejected because it is not, it's not counterintuitive. It makes sense, but for some reasons, maybe good reasons, scientists say that pilot wave is impossible, or it's not the reason for the results that we get in the double-slit experiment. That takes me to the next point. Nonsense means you're on the right path. I've seen many scientists in YouTube, many students, when they talk about relativity and quantum mechanics, they say if you are studying a topic and you feel that this topic makes sense, it means that you didn't understand it. It has to be counterintuitive, otherwise you're wrong. So I think this is some kind of twisted concept. We don't glorify what we don't understand, or we don't glorify what doesn't make sense, because it means we don't understand it. It has to be understood. So the next point to that is relativity's gravity jump ship. What I mean, every scientist, if they hear that there's a new theory to explain gravity, they will jump with eagerness, because deep down in everyone's guts, the explanation of gravity according to relativity doesn't feel right. I mean, isn't that the concept that you have to bear in mind? Things shouldn't feel right when you're studying quantum mechanics and relativity. But of course, if there's a rival theory, it will take a lot of guts for someone to say that Einstein was wrong. And this is what scientists or the pro-science people criticize about religion. This is becoming religion, and Einstein is becoming God. That he can never be mistaken, and everything he said must be right, and every explanation must be correct. But let's hope we see something more about gravity and more explanation than dark matter or dark force or energy. There could be a different explanation for everything that we experience or everything that we see in relativity and quantum mechanics. A whole different theory with the same results, but even different math and different equations that will get the same results, but it makes sense. This is possible. And I'd like to play a video here by Richard Feynman that he's approaching a point similar to this.
Now, another thing that people often say is that for guessing, two identical theories, suppose you have two theories, A and B, which look completely different psychologically, have different ideas in them and so on, but that all the consequences that are computed, are exactly the same. Maybe say they even agree with experiments. The point is, though, that the two theories, although they sound different at the beginning, have all consequences the same. It's easy usually to prove that mathematically by doing a little mathematics ahead of time to show that the logic from this one and this one will always give corresponding consequences. Suppose we have two such theories, how are we going to decide which one is right? No way, not by science, because they both agree with experiment to the same extent. There's no way to distinguish one from the other. So the two theories, although they may have deeply different ideas behind them, may be mathematically identical, and usually people say then in science one doesn't know how to distinguish them, and that's right. However, for psychological reasons, in order to guess new theories, these two things are very far from equivalent, because one gives a man different ideas than the other. By putting the theory in a certain kind of framework, you get an idea what to change. which would be something, for instance, in theory A that talks about something that you say, I'll change that idea in here. But to find out what the corresponding thing is you're going to change in here may be very complicated. It may not be a simple idea. In other words, a simple change here makes maybe a very different theory than a simple change there. In other words, although they're identical before they're changed, there are certain ways of changing one which look natural, which don't look natural in the other. Therefore, psychologically, we must keep all the theories in our head. And every theoretical physicist that's any good knows 6 or 7 different theoretical representations for exactly the same physics, and knows that that they're all equivalent, and that nobody is ever going to be able to decide which one is right at that level, but he keeps them in his head hoping that they'll give him different ideas for guessing.
So that was about science. Now let's talk a little bit about religion. And I think religion shouldn't conflict with science. For example, let there be a light. Maybe this is the Big Bang. And in fact, the first one who wrote that concept or theory was a priest from Belgium. You can look it up on the internet. The second thing is the 6 days of creation. They equal 9 to 13 billion years. 100 years ago, if I said that the 6 days of creation mentioned in the Bible or the Quran, they are equal to 9 billion years, people would have said that blasphemy. They would have burned me on a stake, maybe. But after the relativity and Einstein theory and that issue of time dilation, this makes sense. 6 days under certain condition can be equal to 9 or more billion years. Third point was about Noah and the flood. I don't know if in the Bible there's accurate mention that the flood covered 100% of the face of the earth. I don't know, but I know in the Quran it's not mentioned. So maybe it was just the area where Noah and his people lived. It was subjected to that flood. So maybe Noah's Ark didn't have to carry 100% of the animals in the whole earth. So maybe the species that was around him was just 20 or 30 or maybe 100. I mean, including ants and bees and insects. I don't know if he took insects with him, or maybe they just jump into the ship. So these two things, they cover the conflict between science and religion regarding the flood and Noah's Ark, because many people says, or many scientists says, that there's no sign on the earth that there was a flood in the geological layers of the earth and things like that. So I'm saying it doesn't have to be the whole earth. So this is another point that we can integrate religion into science. The last point is evolution. And evolution is really complicated. I don't understand all of it, and I'm not also a priest to defend religion against science in this part. But as I said, there's a gray area between the mishaps of science and the misinterpretation of religion, and within that gray area there is the truth. Maybe few years from now we find more discoveries regarding the evolutions, the evolution, that would make the creation make sense with the explanation of science. So that's what I wanted to say. I hope I made my point clear. Believers should be a little bit more patient. They shouldn't jump to defying science and attacking it. If science says something different to what we believe, then we should be patient, and we should wait for more knowledge and more science. Just as I said about the 6 days of creation and the billions of years and time dilation, we should be patient. And I think it falls in the hand of the believers, not the scientists, because science depends more on experiments and common sense and logic. So they don't have to be patient. There's nothing they're supposed to wait. There's no more messengers. There's no one going to come and explain the religion more to us. That time is gone. The ones who should wait and be patient, and please keep your tongue in your mouth, those fanatics and hard-headed believers, just be quiet, don't attack science, and be patient. And that's it. I hope I made my point clear again, and thank you for watching.